This week on the Baseline Podcast, we are going to be joined by a co-host for the week, Josh Burris, who's a very good friend of mine, and we're going to be discussing everything from football to basketball to everything in between. All that and so much more coming up on the Baseline Podcast. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Baseline Podcast. Hopefully I'll cover all the angles today, but it won't be me today. It will actually be joining with a co-host or a guest co-host for the episode. I know it's been a while, but I'm back and I'm back for good. Hopefully we'll have more weekly episodes of the podcast, as well as Real Talk with Ben's coming back here very shortly, but more on that at another time. But let's jump into it. I'm joined by co-host Josh Burris. Here we go. Hey, everyone. I am back with a great interview of a dear friend of mine, a former colleague of mine. A few months ago now, I had Aaron Lynn on, but this is also another guy from Cedarville that I've gotten to know. We have a little history with a show called Full Court Press. And before we get into that, this is my man, Josh Burris. Welcome to the show. Tell me about a little Full Court Press. How do we have this relationship from the Full Court Press? Explain it to me.
Yeah, man. So, and you can correct me if I'm wrong in any details. Me and Ben and our other friend, Jamie Dodane, we recorded a sports podcast, all Cedarville sports-based, Cedarville University, where we went to school. And I believe Ben came up with the idea and was looking for help. He approached me. We got Jamie involved there, and we just had a good old time. I think we all were kind of learning how to, podcast and record.
It was weird.
Learning how to, make multimedia like this. But we had some good times on there, just growing as a show. We did it for, I think I was a part of it for like a year and a half.
You were like 2 years. And then so the weird part about the show, and I've said this to some of my listeners, they probably have heard this 1,000 times, but I did this show. So it was you, Jamie, and then myself. And then after 2 years, Jamie and I continued it sort of junior year, and then it kind of derailed. And then my brother and I and one of his friends finished it my senior year. So I would say the most success we had was the first 2 years. And then it kind of was hard for me to maintain when the consistency was just like, there was no one there outside of the people I was with. So
tough to find people that
bring
the same kind of passion and interest.
And I think we both said, even during the time we recorded all these, radio shows, that we kind of said that we wish we could have expanded more. Like that was our biggest regret, was like, we had to always talk about Cedarville, and nothing against Cedarville. We both love Cedarville. We graduated from there, but it was something like we both wanted to, and Jamie as well, like wanted to share about what's other sports are out there. And I think we had some good takes on it, right? Like we had Behind the Sport, which was a hit. I mean, that was like the one thing everyone listened to. But yeah, give me your thoughts on that. Like, do you wish would have helped you now if back then you could have spent, those 2 years, maybe actually doing some of those things?
Yeah. Well, first off, if we did expand it, I think that would have obviously made a much longer show, which I don't know if that would have fit into the Resound radio schedule at all, or we could have made it like more than once a week. But then again, that's cutting into time that I know you had to give to.
Yeah, it was basketball.
Jamie to playing, right? Me to my other classes. So yeah, it would have been definitely fun. I think all of us being sports fans, it could have been a heck of a show if we all expanded it to talking about college athletics outside of Cedarville and then the professional ones.
But we threw them in there though. We threw them in there. We'd always like sneak our boss, Mr. L. Mr. L would always listen. He'd be like, wait a minute. Like we'd always at the end just sneak in a few sports. We had to.
Final thoughts segment.
Little final thoughts.
Kind of relevant tournament or postseason or something like that going on. Yeah. But especially like you said, the Behind the Sport, that was an opportunity that we got to talk to some really great Cedarville athletes. Like
we got to see Olympian. We got to hold gold medals
as well at the Paralympics. But we also got to talk to some of the maybe lesser knowns, like fellow student assistant Caleb Jacobs and athletic trainer. I believe it was Mikey Quo, right?
Yeah, Mikey Quo,
So we got to talk to basically everybody involved somehow.
Yeah, and I think one of the cool things, and to touch on what Josh said, as all of you know, that's kind of where I got the love for doing radio. And, Josh always joked with me that I had the, face for radio, the voice for radio, right? The combination. It was a double doozer right there. But one of the coolest things that, Josh and I got to learn was like, every person's different. And part of the thing about Behind the Sport that made it so good was that you learned about someone new every single time, and that's what I loved about doing. That's why I want to do this again, right? Where I'm interviewing former friends, former colleagues, trying to just learn about where they're at, what they're doing, but then also talk sports as well. So the one thing that Josh and I have in common is, well, I'm drinking from this glass right now, and it's a, I mean, they're actually, are they still winning? I don't know. We're recording this on Sunday, the last week of the NFL season. So you might know what happens after this, but I'm drinking from a Browns mug. I know, Josh, you've been watching the Browns all year. I have, from Hungary, been watching the Browns all year, which means I've stayed up very late for some games. I want to make that point very clear. And yet they still didn't make the playoffs this year. Give me your first kind of just thoughts of what you thought before the season started, right? And then what your thoughts were going as we went through the season and as you finished. So what were those thoughts preseason?
Yeah, man. I mean, I do some stuff on YouTube like you do as well. And I did a video with my NFL predictions, and my pick, I went all in. I went with the Browns versus the Buccaneers, with the Buccaneers repeating as champs. But I thought the Browns definitely were in contention. And I think most of Cleveland and most of the national media shared that sentiment that maybe they wouldn't make it, but they definitely were going to continue this season. And then if not make it this year, maybe next season was the year. But yeah, it's just been nothing but disappointing watching, even more disappointing maybe than the 6-10 season when Freddie Kitchens was head coach, because we proved that we can do it last year by making the playoffs. Kevin Stefanski showed he can be a capable head coach. We've shown a capable run game, offensive line, passing game, and this season, just for whatever reason, just totally fell off the rails. We had to deal with some absences, like especially Las Vegas Raiders game, when it was basically practice squad playing against basically all their starters.
And still about one, by the way.
Yeah, we still almost won with Nick Mullins at quarterback, which is wild. And we really should have. I think we gave up defensively on the final drive, and Carlson kicks the field goal, I think is how that ends. But yeah, just an overall very disappointing. And I've seen a lot of bad Browns football in my life, Ben, and I'm sure you have as well. But I think I'm disappointed more about how this season went than when they went 0-16 with Hugh Jackson.
And I'll say this, and as a Browns fan, my dad is a Browns fan, right? So I'm like a second generation. My brother's a trader. He went to the Bengals because he realized that he just needed to, I guess. We won't talk about him because he's been bragging more than I can. It's just ridiculous.
I bet, man. That Jamar Chase pick worked out way better for him than we could have ever imagined.
Hey, you know what? I'll just say this. If the Browns win today, that's 2-0 against the Bengals this year. That's all I got to say. I got something to hold my head on. But I want to point out something. You said this. You said it's been very disappointed, frustrating. I will agree with you when I say this. I think the Browns had their heads way too high above water. And what I mean by that is they were determined that their season was going to be a winning season. They didn't have to do a lot. Like, that's what it looked like to me, right? Like, to me, it looked like they, in their mindset, was like, we're better than everybody, but we don't have to prove it, if that makes sense.
I feel like that was how the 2019 season went. That was the Freddie Kitchens season. That first game when the Titans took it to us, because we were coming off, I think we won like 6 of our last 8 games or something like that after, what was his name? Greg took over as the interim head coach, and we ended on a high note, and it was like, okay, this is the season. And we go down the field against the Titans, score on that first drive, and then they basically pounded us. Yeah. We had 10 or 12 penalties that game, something wild. And I feel like that season, I definitely saw some of what you're talking about. But I think, and not that didn't happen this season, but I think more so this season, it was just inconsistent play calling and not really owning who we are. Like, if you look at the offensive line, you look at our backfield, top to bottom, like Dearness Johnson probably could be starting on half the teams in the league, and he's our third string running back. Yeah. And we never really truly owned being a run first team, like what the Tennessee Titans do with Derrick Henry. Like, they know that they got the best running back in the NFL, and they don't shy away from carrying the ball with him like 30, 35 times a game. They don't feel the need to throw it 30 plus times with Ryan Tannehill, even though they have wide receivers like A.J. Brown, Julio Jones that can get it done. They know what their strengths are and they go to them. And I don't feel we do that with a guy like Nick Chubb. Like, let me give you some stats, because I'm a big stats guy.
Of course you are.
Yes. So let me tell you some stuff that I was pulling up to bring up here. So the other day I saw that someone in the Browns media tweeted that at this point right now, Nick Chubb and Derrick Henry both had the same amount of carries, 219 this season. Of course, Henry has had a much larger load to carry and he's been injured, but I was surprised that they were at the same amount of carries still nonetheless. But Nick Chubb has turned his 219 carries into 1,201 yards, whereas Derrick Henry used his carries for 937 yards, which isn't bad, but you know how much the Titans were using Henry. And if he was still playing a full season, I mean, he was going to push 400 carries.
He was going to push 2,000 yards. I mean, easily.
Yeah.
I mean, easily get 2,000 yards.
With the amount of volume that he was getting. But yeah, so given that they have the same amount of carries, let me just compare their stats side by side here. So you see the yards. Chubb has over 200 more yards. Derrick Henry does have 2 more touchdowns. But Chubb also has 648 yards after contact compared to 487 from Henry. Nick Chubb also has 20 broken tackles, whereas Derrick Henry has 10. And I think we think of Derrick Henry as like just this monster
bruiser.
Yeah. And Chubb, I mean, if you read the numbers and you didn't see the names, you would think that Chubb was Derrick Henry. I would think most people.
Yeah.
Double the amount of broken tackles, more yards after contact, and we just totally underutilized Chubb this year, I felt like.
Yeah.
And even in a season where Baker Mayfield wasn't his best, right? Like we saw a horrible version of Baker Mayfield. And I think he might have been playing hurt this year. So it made that much less sense to try to be a pass-first team with a compromised quarterback. And I'll bring up one more stat, the Packers game, where
boy, don't get me started on that game.
As bad as that game went, we still had a chance to win. We only lost by 2 points. And at halftime, Baker Mayfield had 3 interceptions. Nick Chubb had 5 carries. Now you tell me, why the heck are we still passing the ball and relying on Baker Mayfield when he had 3 interceptions and a half and only running with Chubb 5 times? Like, it didn't make any sense to me.
Yeah. And I'll agree with you. I think first off, I'm going to go back to my preseason, right? Like all of you all know on this podcast, I said the Browns, they're going to make the playoffs. They're going to win 11 games. They'll at least finish second in the division. I think everyone thought that, they're going to make the wild card. They'll be in there. I mean, people were thinking the AFC North was going to get 3 teams. None of them were going to be the Bengals, which is the more of a shocker, right? But I look at the Browns, right? And I coached high school football, 2 years ago now, right? And I learned a lot from that. And I learned the game planning aspect and what we do, right? We look at a team and we say we can beat this team. You cannot tell me that every week you put that offensive line and those 2 running backs and Hunt when he's healthy and Chubb in that backfield, that is not the best thing you can do, right? Like I look at this team and I sit here and I go, we got rid of Odell, which might have been the really bad decision because then you realize you have no threat. I love Jarvis Landry. Like I love the guy's leadership. He's not a guy that's going to beat you deep. He's not a guy he's going to get you your 10 catches a game if you want him to. The Peoples-Jones I thought was going to be there. He's slowly slipped out of the realm of things because he's been injured. And again, I have to go back to Baker, and I'm going to bring up Baker because I think it's a thing that everyone's talking about.
Yes.
And I've said this at the beginning of the year. I wasn't sold on Baker. I think last year Chubb really kind of carried him and carried this team. And what I mean by that is I'm not saying Baker's incapable. And Baker made some great throws last year. That the game against the Bengals when he made that ridiculous throw to Peoples-Jones last year was amazing. I think of Baker his rookie year when he was just tearing it up and set a record, which was broke by Justin Herbert, but that's besides the point. I think Baker is a good quarterback. Do I ever think he's going to be a great quarterback? That is yet to be seen. The reason I say that is because the man played with a torn labrum on his non-throwing shoulder. He also had a bum ankle pretty much the whole year, and his knee was banged up. I'm sorry, I played quarterback in high school and middle school. I will tell you, even if it's not your throwing shoulder, having anything that's keeping you from making your motion hurts like heck. And it's going to cause you to be frustrated, and it's going to cause you to make throws that you're not used to making. And so I think the whole Baker conversation, I'm interested to hear your take, Josh, because I do agree with you. Nick Chubb should have been handed the ball at least 100 times more. And I don't think anybody can argue with me with that. And I'm going to throw this out here, and I said this before the season. I got weird, crazy eyes. I think Nick Chubb is better than Derrick Henry. Now, people think I'm crazy. But I'll be honest with you. Name me a running back that can block, pass catch, and run the ball the way Nick Chubb does. Derrick Henry, he can run over people, but he's been proven he can't block that well. He's proven he's not a great pass catcher out of the backfield. You name me a better running back and I will listen, but it's so hard for people because they just sit there and they're like, oh, well, yeah, you're kind of right. And so I'm just interested to hear, what is your thoughts on Baker? There's a big decision going into the offseason, going into next year. According to Stefanski, he's the quarterback next year, but it's the NFL. I don't believe a lick about it until I see it. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah. Well, first, let me go ahead and agree with you to an extent on Nick Chubb. I think he's a top 3 running back. And with the way that the Cleveland Browns use him, he might be the best kept secret in the NFL. Because you get to see Henry on full display with the amount of carries he gets. When Christian McCaffrey is healthy, we're seeing, the Panthers use him to the max, getting like 10 catches a game and 20 carries to go with that. And Nick Chubb is probably up there, but we're never going to know what he's truly capable of because we never try to use him to his full potential. Now, as for Baker, I have been on the Baker Mayfield hype train since last year after what I saw from that guy. I was like, this is our quarterback. This is our man. This is going to be, the guy for the next decade. Like after all this time of not being able to have that guy, trying out someone new, like every 2 years, you see the famous jersey, on Facebook that people always share with like the 30-something names of quarterbacks. It's like that ends with Baker Mayfield in my book. Yeah. Now, at the same time, is Baker Mayfield a guy that we're going to rely on to throw 40 plus times a game to win us games like the Tampa Bay Bucks do with Tom Brady or the Packers do with Rodgers? I don't think so. I don't think he's that guy, but he has proven that he is a winner. He's a gamer. He loves Cleveland, which I've always appreciated, like a guy that actually embraces.
Well, right now, I mean, half the fans hate him. So let's hope he keeps loving
That's the Cleveland. Other thing too, is like, I would have turned on this fan base. Like the fan base has given him and probably several other players plenty of reason to turn on. It's like, man, you guys have had the same terrible quarterbacks for years. We finally hit one that isn't awful and you want him gone.
But I'll say this though. My dad, I talked to my dad about this, it is hard for a fan base that has lost so much and to finally find a quarterback that you think is good and you think can do it. I get it to an extent, right? Like I understand the frustration because they're like, okay, this is our guy. We're paying him so much money next year. Like we think this is our guy, right? And I think that's where I understand, but I do get your point. Like, really, guys, like this guy he's given everything. He does love Cleveland, which is something that I love. I love the fact that somebody actually loves Cleveland. Half the time they come here because no one else wants them. And to see that Cleveland's actually a place that players want to come, like Clowney, like some of these guys are like, I want to go play in Cleveland. It's a cool feeling, but I'm like, the fans aren't helping the situation right now. Cause it's like, I get you're frustrated, but let's be honest. You would take a 7-10 season any other year if last year didn't happen. You would take that.
Yeah.
In a sense.
Any year, given what we've seen 0-16 seasons, we've seen 1-15 seasons,
exactly.
We've seen 4-12 seasons. And so when you look at it from like maybe from the outside looking in and you're like, man, you guys have won. Let's see. They've won 7 games Baker's rookie year. Then they won 6. Then they won 11 the next year, including a playoff game.
Yep.
And this year we're going to finish like 7 maybe 8 if they beat Cincy today. Well, that'll be told later on. But when you do watch the games and you see what is holding us back, which is quarterback play, especially this season, that's when it's like, man, we need to move on and get somebody else because we literally are a quarterback away. But I'm with you, I think, on the fact that we don't have a healthy Baker Mayfield right now.
Exactly.
And I think this season is more of an outlier than the other ones. I think we have evidence that Baker Mayfield can be a good quarterback. And I think this year something just was very, very wrong. Like you mentioned, the torn labrum after week 2 against Houston, because I believe in that game he had completed 90% of his passes.
Yeah, it was ridiculous.
75% of his passes week 1 against Kansas City. Like it was looking like an even better version of Baker than the year before. And then that injury happened. He just never was really the same. And I had flirted with the idea of, okay, maybe we should bench him for the rest of the season.
I mean, Case Keenum's look good. By the way, Case Keenum's look good. Like Case Keenum hasn't looked bad when he's come in. Like it's a guy that can manage the game.
The Vikings to the playoffs. Like he's played in the playoffs. He's won games, maybe not because of him, but he can be a game manager. He's
exactly.
a vet. So it was like, okay, well, maybe we don't have the full potential that Baker Mayfield brings us, but clearly Baker is he's crippled right now. He's being held back by that shoulder, clearly. And I think after this season, when he fully recovers, we're going to see a much better version of him next year. But the contract you brought up, I'm glad you brought that up, because let me tell you what I think they're going to do with his contract. And tell me if you think I'm accurate. So the last quarterback that was kind of in this similar situation, I think, was Dak Prescott.
Yeah.
And Dallas was paying everybody around him. They were paying, Ezekiel Elliott, Amari Cooper, that offensive line. They paid Jalen Smith, who actually isn't anyone with the team. But they were paying all these guys, and it's like, well, when is Dak going to get his payday? And they just kept franchise tagging him. And
they're waiting. They were waiting and waiting.
Yes, they were. And it ended up working out for them in the end, I think, because now everybody got paid. And I feel like right now we saw them give contract extensions to Wyatt Teller. And I believe either Treader or Batonio, maybe both of them.
Batonio got it one. I'm trying to think who else got one. Treader's in talks to get in another one.
You got Miles locked up, I think, the year before.
Yes. You got Miles. You got Ward coming up, which Ward's already going to get a new contract. Chubb signed a new contract in the offseason. And I agree with you.
There's a lot of money that needs to be given to, I think, guys that maybe bring more to the table and contribute than what Baker does. And it's kind of odd because as Cleveland fans, we've never been in this position where we've had this much talent.
Yeah.
That now it's like, okay, we've seen it happen with the Kansas City Chiefs. Like when everybody had their contracts come up, they paid Mahomes, and now they're not exactly able to keep everybody. And we're kind of getting into that boat now. I think we're going to handle it the way that Dallas did, but what do you think? Does that sound like, do you see that happening, or how you think they'll handle Baker?
I mean, I've always said this, right? Like I've always said this, that I think I believe in Andrew Berry. I think Andrew Berry is the best GM the Browns have had in my lifetime. I have no doubt about that. The way he's handled the draft, I think they've drafted amazingly. JOK, who they got from Notre Dame, is probably one of the steals of the draft. Newsome, if he stays healthy, will be good. You look at some of these guys they've drafted in the past, right? I think this is what they're going to do with Baker. They're going to look at Baker in the offseason. They're going to say, look, Baker, you have 1 year left. Prove it to us. And I'm not saying they're going to get rid of him, but I think they're going to say, like, hey, you want that contract that Allen got, that Lamar Jackson got, that all these guys are getting, then go prove it to us. And if he doesn't, let's say he puts up next year 25 and let's say 12, right? Like not a terrible year. He throws for 3,500 yards, decent amount. That's if they get a wide receiver in the draft, which we'll talk about in a bit. Mm. But if he gets that, and let's say the Browns win 1-2 games in the playoffs, then you're seriously talking like, okay, we can lock him up. Or do you go the other way and say, wait a minute, let's just keep franchise tagging him. Let's spend that money there. Let's lock up everyone else. And then when those guys get older, those guys get out of their prime, then we can start paying Baker. I feel like this is what I feel. I feel it's going to be similar to a Dak situation, but I think the Browns will be quicker to pull the trigger than the Cowboys. I think you'll see the Browns go, we have to lock him up, because if we don't, this could be chaos. I think it all depends on what the Browns do in the first half of the year next year. If the Browns start the year in the first 9 games and they win, let's say 6 out of the 9 games, 7, you're going to see them look at Baker and say, we're going to extend him. If not, and they struggle again, I don't know what we're talking about. But I do believe that the Browns will make a big decision this offseason, deciding on when and if they will give him an extension beforehand or not. I would be 100% shocked if they give him an extension after next year.
Yeah, especially with the injury question. You don't know exactly the full version you're going to get yet. And I think the other difference, the small difference between the Dak and Baker situation, is that Dak, I think, openly was demanding like a $45 million a year contract. And Baker hasn't really put out any demand, but I also don't think he's putting up the numbers that Dak was that would command a $40 million a year contract. I think I would be okay with giving Baker like around the $30 million, just because, I mean, that's even technically overpaying him. Like Tannehill's getting $37 million a year to hand off to Henry 35 times a game. And it's just the position, right?
Yeah.
Like the quarterback position is going to demand that kind of money. So I'm kind of like, okay, well, we're going to have to overpay, I suppose, $30 million to Baker. That's what I would be comfortable with right now. But that $40 million number, I wouldn't do that. do exactly what you said and say, prove it, that we give you 40, because we also kind of have leverage in a sense that who's going to come and get Baker and give him that $40 million outside of Cleveland, right? Like he almost has to come back and take the money that we give him regardless, because we can also say we got Keenum as our backup. He's a guy that has made it to the playoffs, and
think about the
quarterback again.
And think about that draft, not this year's draft. This year's draft sucks for quarterback, but the next year you have CJ Stroud, you have Bryce Young, you have some studs coming out, not this draft, but the next draft, that the Browns can be like, look, Baker, you didn't do enough for us. We have enough stuff that these rookie QB can do decent for us. Now, I know all of the defensive players are hating us right now because we're just talking offense, but this is my thought. I want to hear your thought, right? Like everyone was hyping up this defense. I am very verbal about the fact that I thought the defense sucked last year. I thought it was one of the worst parts of the team. And this is my thought for you, or my question for you is, do you think this Browns defense improved enough to give you confidence going into next year, losing maybe a couple guys, but you could say this defense can do as what they did this year or better next year? Because they did play really well this year. People don't realize they played really well. They just had a few bad games. What is your thoughts?
They did. I was checking that out because there has been times like the Chargers game where the defense just totally collapsed, allowed 26 points in the fourth quarter, and we lose that game 47-42. But overall, I think the defense did improve. Just let me give you some more stats here, Mr. Stat Guy. So
there he is.
Yards per play last season, we allowed 5.5. This year, we allowed 5.1. We did force 21 turnovers last year. This year, we had 19. So it's not as much, but it's also not bad to be right there. First downs, we gave up 352 last year. This year, we gave up 316. So, just a couple metrics to look at right there. I think we overall did improve defensively. One area that I think we really, really need to improve on that I don't think Andrew Berry's even going to address is linebacker play.
Yeah, I
believe on record saying that linebackers aren't very important in today's NFL. But I think you look at any kind of great defense ever, they always were led by great linebacking play. Like I think Baltimore Ravens with Ray Lewis and the Carolina Panthers with Luke Kuechly, the 49ers with Patrick Willis. Like great defenses have always been led by great linebacker play, and we just don't have that. Like we did draft Jock, and I hope he can be that guy for us. But as it stands right now, that's clearly the weakness of our defense, and I don't think it's ever going to get addressed. But the defensive line, as far as our pass rush goes with Clowney, hopefully we can keep him around. Myles Garrett, I think, is the best pass rusher in the NFL, period. The secondary is strong when it's healthy,
yes.
Right?
The Browns DBs are never healthy. I swear, every year I've watched the Browns since I've been a kid. The Browns DBs are never healthy.
There's been at least 2 games, I think, this year and last year where we had literally backups at all 4 seconds.
We had safeties this year playing cornerback. That's how bad it was.
Yeah.
But I also want to point out this. I agree with you with Garrett, and people are going to be like, what about TJ Watt? I'm like, he plays for a linebacker. I don't put that in the same comparison.
We'll go with edge. How about that? Just
edge. I'll just say this.
Best edge rusher, I think Myles Garrett.
I would agree with you that, but I think Garrett would be also mad the fact that he had 15 sacks through the first 14 games, and then he's just disappeared. Like he hasn't the last few games. He's disrupted in the sense of knocking passes down, stopping runs in the backfield. But I think what teams are realizing now is just do everything on the opposite side of him, which is not his fault. I'm not saying it's his fault. I'm just saying I think he would tell you I should have 25 sacks this year. Like that's just who Garrett is if you look at it.
Right. And I think the casual fan would only look at sacks too and judge. And you really can't do that. You have to look at total pressures. You have to look at QB hits. You have to look at the direction, like you said, that teams are running and passing the ball at. You got to look at double teams. And there's just so much stuff that adds up. Like in Chase Young, your boy Chase Young from Ohio
State. That's my man. That's my dude.
He's one of my favorite examples to point to here because at the end of his last season at Ohio State, in their 3 biggest games, I believe it was Michigan, Big Ten championship with Wisconsin, and then the playoff game against Clemson, he had 0 sacks. And people like Skip Bayless were pointing to that, and people like Mel Kiper were pointing to that and saying, can he really make an impact in a big game? Like, he didn't have sacks in arguably Ohio State's 3.
He was double teamed half the time.
But when you get right, you look at the amount of time he double teamed watching the film and even watching.
Sorry. Not everyone's Aaron Donald. It can just like bear rush people and outdo everyone. Like, sorry.
Right. You know, like that's just like what was my fair example, because I was like, okay, even like these big time NFL analysts don't even really know what they're watching when they see it. Like, you can't just look at the sacks. Like, there's just so much more involved in being a good pass rusher.
I agree with that. Yeah, I get that. And so, Mike, to finish up the Browns here, what is your thought on the draft? Like, I'm just going to give you my thought, right? Like, I think it's without a doubt, and I swear if they don't do this, which it's the Browns, so I can't really put anything to it, they need to draft a receiver in the first round. And I know they hate doing it. The Browns hate drafting receivers in the first round, but I'm sorry, because we had that bust that we don't talk about from a few years ago. But Coleman, sorry, I mentioned his name.
That's the year we should have taken Michael Thomas too.
Don't even start with me. And so this is my thought. I have always, on my draft, my mock draft, I have either Olave or Wilson from Ohio State. I know people are like, they'll never do it. I'm like, listen, most likely Jameson Williams will be gone by that point. You have an in-state receiver. You imagine the fans would be all over it if you got Garrett Wilson or Chris Olave to stay in-state and to come up and play with Baker. I think you add a different dynamic to this team if you put a Chris Olave who can run the deep ends with no one touching him. So that's my thought. I think they'll go first, second round will be like receiver. I'm guessing, I'm not quoting this, they either will go with the best available or they'll try to get another tackle because they suck on their one side of the tackle. So what's your thought? That's my thought. I think they'll go receiver at some point in the first 2 rounds.
Yeah, I think when you look across the board, like we just talked about linebackers and how big of a need that is, but we know Barry's not really interested in linebackers. So I don't think we will draft one there. I don't think the secondary needs any more depth. They just need healthy. So we will ignore that as well in the first round. And offensive line, I think, is like one of the best in the league. Now, you did mention the right side of the line. I believe Conklin is our guy right there.
He's always injured, though. He's always injured.
Hurt, yes. But is drafting like a backup right tackle like the best use of our first round pick? I'm not so sure it is. So I will go with you and say that receiver definitely should be addressed. And we're going to be in that middle of the first round, like you said. And I think the 3 guys that everybody's talking about are Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, Jameson Williams.
Funny. All Ohio State guys, right?
All Ohio State guys.
Technically.
Yeah.
Right.
And then Drake London and David Bell.
No, we don't care. We don't want them. We don't want them. I have to bring
up
I know that.
Objectivity, journalism, you know?
I know journalism.
But if I had to, I would take Garrett Wilson. And the only problem is I don't know if he's going to be there by the time we get picked, because to me, he's the best receiver in this draft. And I'm sure there's a team ahead of us that would love to snatch him right up. But I'm kind of with you in the way that, like, I know Garrett isn't from Ohio. He went to high school in Texas, but he played at Ohio State 3 years. The Cleveland fans are mostly all Ohio State fans. They would totally embrace that. And one thing that we did lose when we did trade Odell Beckham was the big play threat, right? Like, Jarvis Landry's, like, he's a great slot, but he's not going to break off any huge plays. We have a lot of great tight ends that aren't going to break off any huge plays. We're kind of counting on DPJ to be that guy right now, but
he's from Michigan, so we can't. I'm sorry. I had to.
Maybe some Browns fans / Ohio State fans will share that thought with you. But I also am kind of like, at the same time, he's a 6th round pick, and he's kind of, I think he'll be a solid receiver on this team, but I'm not sure he is going to be.
He's a great punt returner. He's a great punt returner and a guy that's going to get you occasional games where he'll catch 5 catches for 70 yards. That's who
I am glad that we drafted him. Like in the 6th round, that was one of the largest steals. I was all over Twitter saying that, like, biggest steal of the draft. Like the amount of talent DPJ has for a 6th round pick is like, I've never seen it before. So I do like DPJ, but when we did lose Odell, and I think it will in the long run be the better move, just because you can look at Baker's stats and they were better when he was off the field. I'll never figure out why that was.
It's also OBJ. OBJ is just a drama queen. And people hate me when I say that, but I'm like, I'm sorry. Like here's AB, Antonio Brown, here's OBJ. They're the same cut from the same cloth. They're guys that are very productive when they get the ball. They're very productive when they do well. When they struggle, they get angry at everyone else but themselves. And AB's blaming Tom Brady. I'm like, really? You're going to blame the GOAT? Like, I think that's the last guy you should blame. And it's the same with OBJ. He's out here mocking the Browns. I'm like, dude, you're with the Rams averaging like 9 yards a catch right now. Like, I'm looking at his stats and I'm like, dude, Cooper Kupp's way better than you right now. So it's like that whole scenario.
I can't say that this is how AB thinks, but I think Odell would definitely be a guy that would rather have 15 touchdown catches, 100 yards a game, and 4 games all season, rather than maybe have 500 yards receiving, maybe 5 touchdowns, and make the playoffs, because that's just the kind of guy he is. He wants money.
He wants money. He wants money. That's what he wants.
Him more money to have those kind of numbers. Exactly. So back to our initial point, I would take Garrett Wilson if he's there. I don't think he will be, though. So then it's down to, okay, do we want Jameson Williams or Chris Olave? I would probably be more inclined to go Olave, just because we see more.
He's done it more. He's done more. He's done more.
Jameson, we don't know. Like, he's clearly talented. Like, his recruiting rankings say that.
He's with Alabama.
He had at Alabama with Bryce Young says that, right? And we'll probably find out more at the Combine and Pro Day and stuff like that. But at least right now, if Wilson isn't that dude, I would say let's go Olave, because I've seen him do it so many times at Ohio State, and I know he's a baller.
Yeah, and so, that's like we said, we could talk hours on the Browns, because I think the Browns are a team that I think next year, and let's do this way too early. Let's put it out here. We're here on January the 9th, 2022. We're putting out there. What is your thoughts for next season? What is your predicted record for the Browns next season? Let's just throw it out there. With everything, we don't know who they're drafting. We don't know what's going to happen with Baker. If you can put it out there, just, let's go for it. Why not?
Well, I do think Baker Mayfield's going to be the quarterback in 2022. I don't really follow or believe any of the drama going on there. So we are going to have a fully healthy Baker Mayfield at quarterback. We're going to have a fully healthy offensive line and secondary to start the season out, hopefully. How long that'll be, I don't know. But without looking at the schedule, without making any kind of predictions, like, I can tell you what I would hope. I would hope that Nick Chubb is getting 350 to 400 carries, but I don't think he's going to get that either. So which version of Kevin Stefanski will we get? Will we get the one that kind of owns who we are as a run-first team, or will we get this Kevin Stefanski that's going to pass the ball at Baker more? I'm going to, for prediction's sake, say it's going to be somewhere in the middle, just because there is a lot of uncertainty right now. And I'm going to say that next season, just with Baker being healthy, we will bounce back and we will win 9 games at least. Everything else, is going to depend on how much we utilize Nick Chubb, how much that offensive line and secondary is healthy. So I think 9 wins should be the floor next year. And the ceiling, assuming that everybody's healthy and we're playing to our strengths and stuff, 12 to 13 wins should be the ceiling there. So we're going to be in that 9 to 13 win area. So let's just say 10 wins. Let's just say next season's a 10-7 season.
That's what I was thinking. I was going for about the 10-win season. I think it's going to be, I think if Stefanski realizes he needs to hand the ball off more, then I think this team could win. This team next year, if it was the same team, could win 13 games next year.
It definitely wasn't a lack of talent. I think the lack of health in the secondary and Baker coupled with bad play calling, and
COVID played a factor too. And I think, So I think that's going to be the way it is. I mean, if you look at the NFL too, it's all over the NFL. I mean, you look at the Ravens. I mean, Lamar's been injured. They lost 5 running backs. You look at the Steelers. That's also another thing is, hats off to Big Ben. I mean, if this is it for you, I'm not a Browns fan. I mean, I'm not a Steelers fan. I'm a Browns fan, but I got to give your hat. He's an Ohio kid. He went to my dad's high school.
Brown Stadium.
Yeah. And Big Ben he's just a great guy to watch. I mean, his heart, he's also just a great man of God too. Just his heart. It's just an amazing guy. There's the Browns. Let's move over, same football. We'll stay football. Let's move over to the college realm, because as Josh knows from our time on the Full Court Press, he knows I'm a huge Ohio State fan, probably more than any person should be. I don't know if that's an actual thing. But Ohio State played, I'll just say this. They had an interesting season, but we'll get to them into a bit. I want to give your thoughts on just the college football season as a whole, Give me your thoughts, what you thought of it, anything that stuck out to you. You can talk about Ohio State if you want. If not, tell us about what stuck out to you this year.
Yeah, so for your viewers that don't know, my team is the Florida Gators, and it wasn't a very good season. The only good that came out of it was that Dan Mullen finally got fired for his inability to recruit and call plays and run a defense.
And run a team.
Yeah, like basically overall, like inability to run a team. There you go. That's basically everything that I just said. So, but my fandom stretches past Florida. I'm more of a fan of college football in general. But even though I am a Florida fan, I probably know the most about Ohio State just because I was born and raised in Ohio. Most of my friends are all Ohio State fans, and they do tend to be on TV a decent amount. So
we're obnoxious fans, so you have to hear it.
And you're obnoxious, yeah. So I'm definitely down to talk about Ohio State with you this season. But thoughts on college football overall, like and maybe you feel the same way, and we can talk about this more after Ohio State. This was a very interesting start to the season, wasn't it?
Yeah,
like we saw Clemson go down. We saw a lot of teams like maybe not necessarily lose, but underperform very early on.
Then the NIL coming out too. The NIL just threw a wrench into everything.
It really did, man. Like I think that really was a distraction to some of these players. Like we can think of
Quinn Ewers. Quinn Ewers.
Oh yes, man. Quinn Ewers.
Don't even get me started on that. Dear Lord. Gosh.
Moving on from the start of the season, though, too, we're at the finish now. Like, there's been a lot of changes in college football, like the NIL, the most recent one, but all the rules made to the transfer portal.
It's ridiculous.
All of the schedule, the way that the schedule goes, man, whereas, like, coaches kind of have to play into next season during this season, which is why head coaches leave during season sometimes to take coaching jobs elsewhere. I mean, Brian Kelly almost left a Notre Dame team that still had a shot at the playoffs if enough teams lost. Like if Georgia gets it done against Bama in the SEC championship, Notre Dame's a playoff team, and Kelly jumped ship already. I was kind of hoping that would happen just for the humor.
Oh, and his fake accent. You know, did you love his fake
family?
Yeah.
That was fun too. Yeah. So between coaches jumping ship and players jumping ship via the transfer portal, name, image, and likeness money this year, and players just even more players sitting out of bowl games. Like we initially, when this started, we just saw guys that were maybe going to be top 10 picks that had like tens of millions.
Ridiculous.
Now we're seeing even 4th and 5th round guys sit out.
I want to stock on that for a second. Okay, because this is going to be my take. All right. I grew up with a dad. I mean, you know this because I think you met my dad. You met my dad, right? I think you met my dad. I don't remember if you have or not.
One time.
Yeah, one time I think. He's an old school football coach, right? Grew up in was born in 60, grew up in the 60s and 70s watching Woody Hayes coach. And I'm an old school guy, right? Like when I started coaching football, I was in the middle, right? Like I had the new school kind of thought process to things, but I was still very old school in the sense, like you play as a team, you go in as a team, you go out as a team. This is my thought. And I'm talking even for my own Ohio State guys, right? Like I was really honestly ticked off when I saw Chris Olave, these guys step out, because I'm going to be honest. I will give it to Chris Olave though. And I'll mention this. He stuck it out at the game. He didn't play, but he was there with the guys. This is my thought on stepping out of a bowl game. Josh, answer me this. Do you think 15, 20 years ago, you would have saw, let's say Matt Leinart or Vince Young say, you know what? I've had enough. I'm going to get paid. I'm going to take a step away from the game that I love, that I know. Who cares about injuries? Oh, wait, I do care about injuries, and I'm going to take time out. Give me your thought. Do you think that would have happened with a Vince Young or a Matt Leinart at their prime, or Reggie Bush?
That's a tough comparison, just because Matt Leinart, I believe, played in 3 national championship games. At least USC did make it to 3 in a row, and I believe Leinart was a part of all of them.
Okay, so. We'll take another one. Adrian Peterson.
Colt McCoy though. We can take Colt McCoy and Adrian Peterson.
Yeah. That's what I thought, though. Like would they have done that, though? That's my thing. Is I don't think these guys because that never crossed their mind. They were about playing games. I mean,
they never did. Like Leonard Fournette and Christian McCaffrey were the first 2 to do that, and it was just wild to think of that.
It was weird.
I don't know if anybody saw it expanding as much as it has, but I don't think anybody would have ever done it, and it was just a different culture. And today's guys are, I mean, I think Kirk Herbstreit took a lot of heat for saying this, but they don't. I'm kind of with him in the way that they don't love the game as much.
They don't.
I don't have a problem with them saying that it's a business decision if they own it. You know what I mean? Like if they're going to sit out of their bowl game because.
But dude, if you're a 2nd or 3rd round pick, Like,
right.
That's my thought. Like
for the third round picks, it's a little bit more like Haskell Garrett and Marcus Williamson and guys like that set out the Ohio State game. That was just like, that doesn't make
don't get me started. Marcus Williamson, I disowned him now.
Man,
I'm
Marcus
sorry.
Williamson,
I disown him now.
That was a fun story to follow, man, as an outsider.
Yeah, and I'll be honest with you, all of it's not true. I mean, I've listened to podcast after podcast since that. And all these Ohio State guys are like, wait, whoa.
That wasn't true. Yeah.
Okay. So this is my thought on that, right? Like, I understand, like, okay, I'm not trying to be like this, like this real mean dude that's saying
everybody's going to point to Matt Corral in the Sugar Bowl, I believe, because he went out with an ankle injury and they're going to be like, see, that's exactly.
But he came out and said, though, he came out and said, like, I would rather go down with my brothers than to quit on them. And like, he's come out and said that. And it's like
I watched that bowl game and mostly because Matt Corral was playing. Like, there haven't been too many games that I've watched this bowl season, just because to me, it's just mostly been pretty boring.
And what's the most viewed game of the bowl season? Oh wait, the Rose Bowl. Because Ohio State was there. And anyways, I could go on about that whole sitting out thing and the NIL. Quinn Ewers, you're dead.
It's
to me.
very broad. For just a segment of this podcast, you're going to take too much. Oh
gosh, yes, and maybe in the future, maybe in a few weeks, you can come back on. We'll talk about more specifics of the NCAA, that weird nitty gritty. But yeah, let's talk about Ohio State, because as an Ohio State fan, obviously I went through the urban era, as I call it, right, where I went from the Tressel era to the Fickle debacle there for a year, and then the urban era, which was amazing. I loved it. It was. We won a championship. I think we should have won a couple more in that time, but well, that's just he say, whatever you say. Mm-hmm. But I look at Ryan Day, and he's done an amazing job. This year was a disappointment. I'll be 100% honest with you. I mean, we lost to Michigan. That it's a disappointment. Even if we would have won a national title, I still would have been like, this sucked. This year sucked. But you look at it and you look and see, they lost to Oregon. The defense was the problem with the Ohio State team. You saw in the Rose Bowl. This offense, when it's on fire, no one can stop it.
Worse than any offense in college football, I don't think.
And it's crazy. You imagine, and Josh, maybe you can talk about this. If they had just a sub-average defense, if they just had a defense that could maybe get, keep a team to 20 points every game. If they just had that defense, this team wouldn't have lost a game. And I think you can agree with me on that as well.
I think if Ohio State did play Oregon later in the season, like, that Oregon team just seemed to slowly get worse, and maybe that had something to do with CJ Verdell, the running back, getting hurt, because he lit up Ohio State, as you remember. They wouldn't have had him a second go round, but Ohio State, even on the offensive end, just got better as the season went on. CJ Stroud, I think, was dealing with like some kind of an injury or like just some mental, like,
he was dealing with, like, he came out and said, I read it on an article. He said that he was dealing with like the overwhelmingness. He was injured, but I think once he's calmed down, he turned
because that's another thing about this season was it seemed like there were a lot more conference games and bigger matchups to start the season off. Like, Ohio State started with Minnesota and Oregon, and typically they would be starting the season off against like
San Jose State.
They would start against the MAC, right? And the SEC starts against like the FCS, and there just was a lot more conference games and top Power 5 out of conference games. I felt like to start the season, which I was a huge fan of. Like, Georgia Clemson was a fun one to start off, not necessarily high scoring, but a fun matchup nonetheless. Penn State opened up with Wisconsin, I want to say, and Ohio State started with Minnesota. Like, you don't see a lot of conference games. So that's something that I hope continues to be a trend in college.
And they start with Notre Dame next year. That's their first game. With fun fact, Marcus Freeman, who's a former Ohio State guy who disowned Ohio State, I think, which we don't talk about that. And then he took James Laurinaitis, my dude, the guy I grew up watching. He's also going to be coaching at Notre Dame. But I want to talk about Ohio State in the sense, I will say that this is probably the best offense I've seen since the national championship year, when they had a not very good quarterback. And that's saying a lot. But I think this offense goes up with that LSU offense from 2 years ago. That was just dynamic. The difference is LSU had a defense. That's the only difference. Now, my thought, I want to hear your thoughts on this. The whole Heisman thing. I think that pissed off Stroud. I think that's why you saw him throw for 579 yards. When you get told you're the fourth best player, if you look at even that Michigan game, he played very well. I even said he should have finished at least top three. Because Pickett was good. I'm not saying Pickett wasn't good.
I'll give you this much. I think top 3 out of the 4 finalists that they gave us, yeah, because I would take C.J. Stroud over Kenny Pickett as well. But most of the season, Ben, I didn't really know who the clear-cut Heisman was because I think
I agree with you. I didn't know that either.
You kind of see like, okay, there's 2, maybe 3 guys that are standing out and they're going to be in that Heisman talk. But all season long, it was just kind of like, man, I can think of maybe a dozen dudes that have an argument. And I know Bryce Young won it, and he might have been the best dude out of those 4. But I think Will Anderson, who was
he had a freak season.
Probably their best player. He wasn't even a finalist, but they put Aiden Hutchinson in the finals.
The thing is, Aiden Hutchinson had one good game, like full game against Ohio State. That was like the one.
I think Hutchinson had maybe more than one good game, but he didn't have the numbers that Will Anderson did.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, Will Anderson had it every game, though. Will Anderson was good. That's the difference. Every single game.
Anderson had more tackles for loss, more sacks. And
he had more tackles for loss than anybody. He had more tackles for loss for anybody in the history. Like, that's how many he had. He had like 31.5 or something like that.
As talented as Alabama is, like Bryce Young is a talented player, but I don't think he's their best player. I think if you're going to pick somebody to represent that team, Will Anderson should have been that man. So let's just go over that. I think Kenneth Walker should have been.
Yep, I agree.
Finalist, and he wasn't there. But those would have been my first 2 choices was Will Anderson and Kenneth
These were
Walker.
my finals. Going after the Michigan game, my finalists were this. It was Will Anderson, Young from Alabama. So 2 Alabamas. And I had Walker and I had Stroud. The reason I had Stroud in there was because later in the year, as the year went on, he got better and better and better. Now, did I think he was going to win it? I'll be honest, as a Ohio State fan, Ohio State fans are going to kill me when I say this. I never thought Stroud was going to win it. I thought Stroud, if it would be finished 3rd, it'd be amazing. 2nd would just be like the best thing ever for him. I think next year, though, Young better watch out because I think you're going to see a Stroud he's a competitor. He wants to win. And
Not even just Stroud. Like, you got a wide receiver in Jackson
Henderson
that we haven't even talked about yet, Ben.
Listen. There's so much talent. I'll just say this. I'll say this.
You also have a running back in TreVeyon Henderson.
He's a freak.
Get looked at because 1, he's a freshman. They don't want to overuse him, but 2, because of how good the pass game.
By the way, I have his stats up here. He ran for 1,200 yards. By the way, this was the first time he's played since 2019. Fall of 2019 was the last time TreVeyon Henderson played in a game before this year.
Yeah.
So he's a freak.
That dude, if he got the volume. I don't know if he'll ever get the volume at Ohio State with as much as they love to pass the ball, and maybe rightfully so. They have a ton of wide receiver talent that we're going to see next year with Mbuka and Marvin Harrison Jr., G. Scott, and maybe Julian Fleming if he can get on track. But
I'll tell you this, though.
And that dude, I would put him up there with any running back simply because I think if he got the volume that like a Kenneth Walker or a Hassan Haskins or even a Bijan Robinson that he would have been a Heisman finalist.
I'll be honest with you, Josh. You look at this. By the way, I want any fan out there to tell me that Jameis Williams, that he, I don't know, like people are saying, well, he's the best wide receiver. Who'd been the best wide receiver at Ohio State? I'm like, I'm sorry, but Ohio State almost had 3 dudes with 1,000 yards. Williams wouldn't have saw the field this year. If he did, it'd be a returner. It would be as a slot guy. I don't think. I'll be honest with you. You have Wilson, Olave, and Jigba. That was going to be the guys, right? And then whoever else got the touches would get touches. But I don't know. That's my thought.
Alabama found a way to make it work with Jerry Jeudy and Jalen Waddle and Henry Ruggs and Devontae Smith all at the same time. Now, obviously, there were some guys that were getting more volume than others, but I think when you got that much talent in the room, you got to figure out how to utilize everybody. And they all have different skill sets. Like maybe you use Jamison Williams as more of like the same role that they used Devin Smith several years ago.
Yeah.
Because Jamison, that kind of is his talent. I think he might be the best deep threat out of all those guys. You use Jackson Smith and Jigba in the slot, similar to how they were using KJ Hill, but Smith and Jigba is even more talented, so he was getting that much more looks.
Yeah.
And Wilson's kind of like the guy that kind of like has the complete package, can run any route, make any catch that you need him to. And Olave, I mean, that dude just is a scoring machine too.
Yeah, and I again, like I'm nothing against Jameis. I think like he would have fit in. I think Ryan Day would have found a place.
Undoubtedly, though, he wouldn't have had the season he had this year at Ohio State because it would have been a lack of volume. He would have been on the field as much. And, I think that we can talk about whether or not that was a failure on Ohio State for not figuring out how to get Jameson more involved in the offense. But I think that I don't think that Alabama made him the player he is. I think he already was that guy at Ohio State, and he just maybe wasn't properly being utilized.
I agree with that. Now, my thought is, I have a question for you. Were you bummed? Not bummed. You're not really a Ohio State fan, but like, was it disappointing to see that you have 3 receivers put up those numbers this year and not one of them got on the Blitnikoff list? I'm going to be honest with you. I was shocked.
Dude. Yeah. Like not a single one.
Not one of them. You could have put Olave on there because he had almost as many touchdowns as anybody else.
The
Wilson, Nick
these voters, man, they're too enamored with numbers and narratives, right? Like with the Heisman, it's all about the narrative. Like who's the quarterback on the best team? Now, they did vote Devontae Smith the Heisman last year, which I was very happy about. And I was like, okay, well, it's not totally a quarterback award just yet. And I thought maybe they would think off a little bit of that.
I think if Najigba would have had bigger numbers than he did, and then win a game like this before the Rose Bowl, I think he's up there.
Yeah, like Wilson, and we're going to see this on the NFL draft boards too. Everybody's going to think that Wilson is the best receiver, not Jordan Addison. No offense to Jordan Addison, but there were better receivers than him. It's just everybody was looking at the amount of volume that he was getting from Kenny Pickett, and they weren't looking at the fact that Wilson's sharing targets with literally, 2, maybe 3 first-round receivers.
And a running back getting also 25 catches this year. So with TreVeyon Henderson getting catches. So – yeah,
so we have to back off from it being just like a stats award, and I think we got to give it to like the guys that are like actually the most talented.
Yeah, and so
that's what the award is, right? The best receiver in college.
Exactly.
Like, I hope. I don't want to hate on Jordan Addison, but I think Garrett Wilson is going to have a much longer career in the NFL.
Yeah, and so I think you look at this Ohio State team. I think, and I've said this. I think next year they're going to be. I think I have said this. My dad disagrees with me, but I think they were a year too early. Now, what I mean by that is that. I think they were still getting used to all these new bodies. And I think you give them next year, their wide receiver talent might not be as known, but you saw Marvin Harrison Jr. catch 3 ridiculous. I mean, he had 1 catch that was ridiculous. You had Mbuka catch 1 that looked like Willie Mays over here. And you have Nick Jigba. You have all these guys. This team next year with the guys they got coming in, the freshmen they got coming in, the couple transfers they got coming in, this team, I'm sorry, Michigan, you're going to hate coming to Ohio State to play next year. And I have said that without a doubt. Michigan is losing pretty much their whole defense.
That whole defense is very senior heavy. Yes,
and
sir.
Most of their offensive line. And by the way, did you see, isn't it kind of funny how Harbaugh's talking about going to the NFL when he beat Ohio State? Have you noticed that? He gets 1 win and he decides.
He's kind of using that as leverage now, right?
Oh, my goodness. Ridiculous.
Flipping over to that Michigan team, like, they are losing a lot of their defense. I think they're going to have a lot of talent on the offense still because they are going to.
They just don't have a quarterback, though. I just think they struggle with quarterback. They got to pick one.
They do. That's where they have to decide. I think McCarthy's the more talented dude.
Yes.
But I didn't get to see him.
But it's Harbaugh, though. It's Harbaugh. We've seen his decision.
A lot of plays this year, though, and I would like to see more of him. Maybe more of him throwing the ball, but we know that McNamara is limited.
Yeah.
We saw him not turn the ball over. I think that was something that Michigan did very well. McNamara did not throw many picks, and Hassan Haskins did. I don't think he had a single fumble this year.
Yeah, and I think, again.
It did turn the ball over, and sometimes that can be the difference between wins and losses too, is if your defense is getting all these sacks and forcing turnovers and the offense isn't giving the ball back, and they're killing clock with that strong running game and offensive line that they had. It was a very good season for Michigan, but I don't know if they have the capability of repeating this. I think this was, right now, this might have been more of an outlier year for Michigan. And it just all worked out well for them and we can get back to Ohio State being young. Let's talk about the Ohio State-Michigan matchup. It just all lined up perfectly for Michigan to have all these seniors at Michigan in the snow.
And I'm going to give credit to them, by the way. I want to point out, I'm going to give credit to Michigan. Like from the time they got beat, I didn't go and say, all these different things. I'm like, they beat us. They took it to our can, and that's just the way it is. I mean,
they did.
It is what it is.
Wasn't ready for that game. I mean, there's a lot of freshmen and sophomores that play for Ohio State.
They've never played in that game. I think there was 15 players total that had played in that game for Ohio State, so they don't know what it's like.
The game, like how many starters had played there, and I was like, oh man, dude, like. But since Ohio State has just had Michigan's number all these years, I didn't really think rationally about the game. Like it all added up to Michigan winning in hindsight. But I guess I just kind of ignored all that because I just was lazily on my end. Like, well, it's a rivalry game. Ohio State owns Michigan. He's going to crap the bed again, and Ohio State's going to win. It doesn't matter any of this stuff. And boy, were we all wrong?
I'll just say this. I'm still holding on to that whole 2020 we had COVID issue that
oh man, dude,
there's no way.
Ohio State 2020.
There's no way that you had COVID when you played the game before. Don't even start with me on that. That's a whole nother story. But so I think I'll say this. I think college football is going in the right, direction. Before we move on from football, I want to give your prediction. Hopefully this is out. Okay, by the way, all of you all listening, okay, this is hopefully going to be out tomorrow. Since I'm 6 hours ahead here in Hungary, hopefully this will be out before the game tomorrow, so our predictions aren't just like wasted. But I want to hear your predictions going into this game of Georgia versus Alabama. I'm probably going to surprise some people. Maybe I won't. But I want you to go first, and I'll follow.
Yeah, so as it stands right now, the last I checked, Georgia is a 3-point favorite. And based on the way that first game went between these two teams in the SEC championship game, I'm not sure why or what changed, unless the Vegas is looking at the playoff matchups and saying, wow, look how much more Georgia beat Michigan than Alabama beat Cincinnati.
Well, that's another thing we never talked about, by the way. We never talked about Cincinnati.
People expected Bama to blow Cincy out of the water, and while they did win, I think it was 27-6, not as bad, but still, Cincinnati probably would have liked a better showing than that. And Michigan just completely skipped their playoff game. I don't know where they were. I thought they were actually going to win that game.
Because it's Josh, it's called Michigan. That's where they were.
Once again, yeah, Ben. Michigan was kind of tough for me to analyze this year. So.
Well, I also, we didn't talk about Cincinnati enough. Hats off to Cincinnati. I got to give it to you. As an Ohio State fan, I was rooting for Cincinnati. I knew they had no shot, but I was hoping in for them.
I think Cincinnati, at least defensively, showed the recipe on how to beat Bama, right? Like right now, John Mechie is out. I don't believe he's playing in this game. They very limited Jameson Williams' production, Sauce Gardner and Kobe Bryant.
Sauce. By the way, that is the greatest name of all time.
Man, that's got to be the coolest
Sauce.
name here, right?
Hey, sir, what do you do? My name's Sauce.
I don't think Sauce lost a touchdown in his college football career.
I'm going to nickname myself Sauce. I'm going to go to my school tomorrow and be like, guys, call me Mr. Sauce.
Sauce Bowden. Oh, man.
Sauce.
But, yeah, I think Cincinnati defensively showed the recipe on how to slow down Alabama offensively, limiting Jameson, limiting Bryce, but they weren't able to shut down the run game. And I think that was simply because of Bama being so much bigger up front than Cincinnati. Yeah. And that's when you see the SEC versus the G5, right? Like the difference. And Georgia isn't going to have that, right? Like they got those big SEC defensive linemen like Jordan Davis.
Freaking freak. He's a freak.
Absolute monster truck of a man.
Freak.
I don't think that Alabama is going to move Georgia's defensive line as much as they moved Cincinnati's. But I also don't think that enough is going to change between that first matchup to the second matchup to flip this to Georgia's favor. So I'm going to pick Bama simply because they just simply owned Georgia the first time. And even if you say, okay, well, Georgia's made some adjustments, maybe they, make it a 14-point difference because they've gotten better since that game. They've learned a lot. They've made adjustments. Bama, they figured out what you can do to stop Jameson Williams.
Yeah.
Georgia could defensively. Maybe that swings the game 14 points, but I think that still is putting Bama in the lead.
So what's the score prediction?
The score prediction. Do you remember what the score was in the SEC championship game?
Jeez, I don't remember. I can look it up actually real quick. It was Georgia, Alabama.
I want to say it was 44-24.
SEC. It was. Okay, well that didn't get it anywhere. Game summary. Here we go. It was 41-24. Alabama.
Yeah. All right. We will roll with, because Mechie's out and maybe Georgia figures out some ways to stop Jameson. We're going to give Bama 35 points. We're going to say they take away a touchdown, and we're going to say that Georgia maybe steals one more touchdown. We'll say Bama 35, Georgia 28.
All right. Well, I'm going to shock some people. Partly because I did this whole thing for, if you guys remember Aaron Lynn, Fifth and Goal Sports, he did a bowl challenge thing, on ESPN. And I have to stick with my pick. I'm choosing. Wow, there we go. Choosing Georgia. And I'm going to shock people, right? Like I'm going against Saban. I feel like that's a sin to go against the man who always knows how to somehow win. But this is my thoughts on Georgia. I think Georgia's going to have to rely heavy on the defense. And I do think Mechie being out is a lot bigger than people are making a deal of. I think losing him against Georgia could change the tide. What I mean by that is I would say if they can stop the run, if Georgia can somehow stop Robinson, right, you have a really, really good shot of winning this game, because then you make Young say, okay, we're going to take away Williams, beat us with somebody else. So my thought is, my prediction is, I think it's going to be lower scoring. I think it's going to be 24, Alabama 24. Alabama 21, Georgia 24. I think it's going to be like a late field goal or a late touchdown that's going to seal the deal. But I just, it's hard for me to see Alabama doing it back to back, like winning against Georgia twice. I know they've done it before, I believe, right? I think that was the last time they did that too. But I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, let me tell you some Bryce Young stats, because I think there is a recipe to beat Alabama. Now, this was before the playoff game, so they're probably a little bit different now. But 88 of Bryce Young's 314 completions before the playoff matchup had been screen passes. And 70% of the balls he completes have been 10 yards or less.
Yeah.
So he's not exactly like this dynamic playmaker.
He's not CJ Stroud. He's not a guy that's going to sling it.
Bryce winning the Heisman at all, because it's like, this dude is so limited in what he does. And maybe he can throw the ball deep downfield, but he's just not doing it. But for what he's doing, it's just, he's not too dynamic to me. And I think it's very easy to limit him and shut him down in that regard. But here's the other thing, Ben, and this is another reason why I'm going with Bama. I thought this year Bama escaped a lot of teams, right? Like there were a lot of
that Auburn game, gosh,
actually got them with a backup quarterback, Zach Calzada. And I was just like, man, Bama, they're going to get slaughtered by Georgia in this SEC championship game. And then it didn't happen. And then Bama goes on to beat Cincinnati. And I'm just not going to make the same mistake of betting against Saban in a big game like this, because I think he has his team ready to go now. I think everybody knows Saban's always that guy that his team's never playing as good as what he thinks it could be. They're always like underdogs to him, at least. And I'm just not going to make the same mistake of betting against Nick Saban in a big game, or even betting on Kirby Smart to win a big game. So maybe that's just me being lazy again, kind of like how I've analyzed some of these other games. But it's kind of like the Tom Brady thing too, where it's like, I'm not betting against Tom Brady in the playoffs or the Super Bowl. I'm not going to bet against Saban in this game. I think he's going to get the job done.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be a close game. I think it's going to be a heck of a game.
Valid, though. Like I'm not going to disagree with any of them. Like,
no, I mean,
it's going to be a problem. I think they're going to be able to limit Robinson in the run game much more than what Cincy was able to. But there's just some things in these championship games that it's just like experience kind of matters.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be a heck of a game, and yeah, it's just going to be a great game. But yeah, we're going to move from college. Those are our predictions. If it doesn't come out, I'm sorry. I know I was right. It's besides the point. We're going to move to basketball, but we're going to flip the script. Since Josh is not as much watching much basketball at this moment of time, you can give me maybe some questions that you're wanting to know about college basketball or the NBA. You can kind of choose and we could talk about some basketball and stuff like that. So yeah, you can go start on that.
Yeah, man. Let me just lead off by this saying that I do live in Indiana, so I'm surrounded by a decent amount of Indiana Hoosier and Purdue Boilermaker fans. And the amount of pain that Hoosier fans are going through right now of being the inferior football team in the state to Purdue, which I think was totally unexpected. Purdue going like 9-4, winning a bowl game. IU going 2-10, I
think it was, yeah.
Like after last season, like what a disappointment. Going into this season, like Purdue ended up being ranked number 1 in basketball for the first time in program history. IU, I don't think has cracked the top 25, or maybe they were in the lower portion of that. But just a lot of pain for Hoosier fans in the college game right now. But Ben, I actually did watch a couple college games yesterday. Yeah. Try to tune up a little bit for this. I watched my Carolina Tar Heels slaughter the Virginia Cavaliers. Virginia's nowhere near what they usually are, not the caliber that we're used to seeing them play. They won a championship a couple years back.
Yeah.
I watched a little bit of Texas and Oklahoma State after that. Texas seems to be making some noise. They've been in the poll for most of the season. But who are some of these higher caliber teams that you could see maybe winning the national championship once we get to the March Madness tournament?
You know, that's it's kind of a weird thought, isn't it? That, some of these bigger teams maybe aren't as big, right? But I pulling up the standings right now because I had to remind myself. But, I look at, it's very,
I think your traditional powers like Carolina, like they are ranked, I think, right now, but they are down. I think Kentucky is a little bit lower.
I'll say this. I think my pick is still Baylor. I think Baylor is
the defending champs, right?
They're defending, but they're also just freaking good. And actually a former Cedarville grad, Damon Parker is a grad assistant down there. So hi, Damon. Yeah. He got that job. But I look at some of these teams, like I look at Providence is a shocker this year. I mean, they're 14-2 in the Big East, which is not an easy conference to always play really amazing. I mean, they're beating Villanova is 11-4, but I look at some of these other teams, look at the Big Ten, who I think is the best conference in basketball right now. I think top to bottom, you look at it, people will disagree with me, but Michigan State is 13-2, Illinois is 11-3, Ohio State is 9-3, Wisconsin's 12-2, Rutgers, yes, I said Rutgers is 9-5. 9-5. Indiana's 12-3, Purdue's 13-2, Penn State 7-6, Northwestern's 8-4. Michigan's struggling this year a lot more than I thought they would. They're 7-6, but Minnesota's 10-3, Iowa's 11-4. I mean, they have one team that's under 500 in the Big Ten. That's Nebraska. So I'm just going to say there's a good chance the Big Ten could get 10 teams to the NCAA tournament. But to answer your question, I think these are my top three teams that have a shot. Baylor, Michigan State, because I can never go against Michigan State. So I've learned that in my lifetime. And then my other one is, I think North Carolina. I think North Carolina or Duke. Now, Ohio State's beat Duke, but I do think that there is a chance for, I think North Carolina to run the table late. I mean, they're 11-4 right now. Duke is 12-2, but I think there's some about North Carolina and Duke, and especially Duke with Coach K's last year. There's just something about that makes me say Duke's going to do something wild. And it's
kind of like what's supposed to happen, right? Like,
yeah,
Coach K is supposed to win a national championship in his last season, right?
Yeah, I think that's just going to happen. I think that's what we're going to go through, I think, is what's going to happen. But those are my thoughts. If that makes sense, those are kind of like my teams that I think are going to run the table. It might be wrong. If you didn't hear, I didn't say Ohio State. You should be proud of me, Josh. I didn't say Ohio State. I will say, I do think Ohio State will go pretty far, but I don't see them going to the Final Four or anything like that.
I do have to, since you brought up North Carolina, I got to give a shout out to my man, Armando Bacot, because he put up 29 points and 21 rebounds against that Virginia team. And I believe in their last game against Notre Dame, he put up 21 and 17. So that man's balling out.
Yeah,
we're kind of
for sure.
Era at North Carolina right now too, with Hubert Davis being the head coach, because we had all those years of greatness with Roy Williams. Decided to step down. I think it was a smart decision and probably the right decision on his part, because I don't know if he just had lost it in recruiting, but Carolina definitely wasn't living up to the standard that they are used to playing at. And I think he just decided that it was best to step down.
Yeah.
And kind of makes sense, I guess, that Coach K is also doing the same thing, although I don't think Duke has had near as much of a drop off, but it's just kind of like the end of an era. Like, it's kind of odd being at this stage of life and seeing all the guys that you grew up, I guess, kind of idolizing as a kid, finally stepping out of the game.
Yeah, it is true. And it's a time in basketball. And, I, as many of you know, and Josh knows, I spent 3 years as a student assistant on the Cedarville men's basketball team. And, I even watched them and how crazy, how far they've come. I mean, they're playing really well this year. But I learned a lot being an assistant coach, or student assistant on the team. You learn what these coaches go through and the toll they go through. And again, that's why I'm not a coach right now at the college level. And I don't think I ever will be. I'm better behind the mic than I am, telling people what to do and say. But I think it's a crazy time for basketball, but it's still a great time. I love watching college basketball. March Madness over here in Hungary is kind of funny because it's nice. I don't actually have to watch during the time I teach, because all the games are like happening at night here. So it's great because I don't actually have to, miss classes to watch a game. I can just watch them at home on my big screen.
Tell me this too, Ben. We talked about the transfer portal a little bit in the college football world. Has it affected the college basketball world nearly as much?
No, I think, it might. the thing about the transfer portal, I'll mention it a little bit. I know we're past football, but I'm just going to say this about it. People are going to realize, and I think the NCAA is realizing, this is becoming too much. You have 3,000 guys in the portal, and maybe 1,200 might, and 1,200 might find a team. So I think you're going to see regulation, and all the sports are going to say, hey, you can transfer once if you have certain circumstances. I think you're going to go back to similar to what it used to be. You won't have to sit out a year, but you're going to have to go through a process, and you're going to have to go through all this. And if you can get granted, then you'll get granted. But no, it hasn't affected basketball. And I think this is the reason. Because basketball, there's less spots. And once you have a spot, it's very hard, unless you're really good, to go to another school and say, hey, hi, I'm here to take your spot. It doesn't work that way, and I don't think it ever will.
The reason it hasn't affected us so much is because guys can leave after their freshman season as well. Like Caleb Williams, let's just bring up him for an example. Quarterback at Oklahoma, a true freshman. He wouldn't be in the portal if he was in college basketball, being the best at his position. He would be going to the NBA draft right now.
Exactly.
Portal. So that might be another reason.
That's another big thing. And I think we're getting time in the basketball, though. I will say this. I don't think we're getting the time where transfer portal will take over, but I do think we're about to the point when you're going to see the freshman mark is going to go away. I think you're going to see a lot more. The NCAA and the NBA are going to agree that 18-year-olds, if they want to, they can go to the NBA. I really do. I think that's where we're going to be in the next couple of years, and that could change the game of basketball. I love college basketball, but I think it could hurt it. I've said it for years. You're going to have guys think they're good enough. They're going to go not get drafted. And now, since they've signed with an agent, they can't go play college basketball. And I think with the whole NIL, there we go. NIL, I think that could change things. Like, guys might be able to put their name in the draft when they're 18, but I don't know. I think you're seeing a time and change in sports, man. And I think for us guys that grew up younger, in the early 2000s, late 2000s, it's hard for us to see the games change the way they do when you're so used to the same and what it's been for the whole time.
It's just kind of wild too, man. Like, at least the last several years, I can't remember the exact number, but there's a large number of freshmen that are declaring for the draft and going undrafted that signed agent and can't go back. And it's like, man, how did you end up in a position where you lacked that much self-awareness that you made that decision?
And I'll be honest with you, like over here in Europe, like I've Lenzel Smith, I don't know if you remember him, played for Ohio State, lefty. He played for Ohio State about 6 years ago. He actually is playing here in Budapest. And so I messaged him on Instagram. I was like, hey, maybe I can come check a game out. So some of these guys, they get chances over here in Europe because they're American. But I'll be honest, it doesn't pay well. It's not the most glorious thing. Might as well go back to school, get your degree, get basically money for free, which that's my whole other subject. We'll get on to that. The whole NIL thing is annoying because, like, you're going to school for free. You know how much I wish I could go to school for free, and you're getting to do that and money on top of that. That's besides the point. But
yeah, let me talk to you a little bit about my take on NIL. Like, I've always thought that kids should be able to at least make money off the name, right? If they want to charge,
of course,
to camp in their hometown and charge for that, like, that just makes sense to me, right?
Yeah.
Or if somebody wants to buy you dinner, like, you shouldn't be penalized for that, or give you a tattoo, or, fly your family out to watch your game. Like, that's all stuff that I've always thought was weird that you could get in trouble for. But the way that it's just being used and the way that it's unregulated right now, like, we're getting into like slush funds at Texas, where everybody's basically getting paid a salary from boosters, donations.
Well, you're getting guys that have never played a snap, Josh. Guys that have never played a snap, nothing.
That big contract from your play off of your rookie deal. And in the college game, like, correct me if I'm wrong, Quinn Ewers made more money this year than CJ Stroud.
Yes, he made $1.2 million this year and didn't take a snap. He took two snaps. Snaps.
CJ Stroud
divide 1.2 million by 2, and that's what he got per snap.
Yeah. So I think that's kind of like the issue right now, is it's going to kids that haven't proven it yet.
I say this, and I think what's going to happen, and I've said this, it will be, you can't sign an NIL that's worth more than a certain amount of money until after year one. I think they could do that.
I think there's some issues with tampering too, because that's the whole reason Caleb Williams is in the transfer portal right now to begin with, right? Because some companies have been like, well, we can give you this money if you're at Oklahoma, but if you went to like Georgia, we could triple that.
It's like the whole Jackson State thing. Do I believe that Hunter wanted to go to Jackson State? No. I'm not buying it. I'm sorry. I love Deion Sanders.
Work out a money deal from Barstool, who he also works for, to pay him an NIL deal. Like, that seems shady.
I'm sorry. I'm asking you, Josh. If you're our Hunter and you're going, Florida State, Georgia, Alabama, Jackson State, where should I go? You're not going to be on TV. I'm sorry. You're not going to be on TV. You're not going to be shown anywhere. You're going there for a year. What he's going to do, he's going to collect his paycheck. He'll go for a year. He'll transfer. That's what's going to happen. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong. I could be totally wrong, but I've seen it happen with Ohio State. I'll see it happen with Jackson State.
I think that's going to happen too, man. Like, Deion being an employee of Barstool, that seems like kind of like it should be illegal to be able to pay money deals from Barstool, who he also works for at Jackson State. But that's another topic as well. But back to bringing it back to basketball, let me end the college basketball talk with guys that are arising as potential NBA draft picks. And maybe these are guys that are those high school kids playing the G League as well. But who are some of those guys that are in the buzz?
One guy that I think has come out of nowhere. I'll be honest with you. One guy that really shocked me was his name is Keegan Murray from Iowa. I don't know if you've heard Keegan Murray from Iowa.
I have not.
He went from averaging. I got his stats here. He averaged 7 points and 5 rebounds a game last year. This year, he's averaging 25 points and 8 rebounds a game. And this is against Big Ten teams, ACC teams. He's one name. I'll give you one more because it's in the Big Ten as well. You've heard of him last year. I know you have. No, sorry, not him. Other guy. Johnny Davis. Have you heard of him? Last year, he averaged 7 points. This year, he's averaging 23. He plays for Wisconsin. He's a forward. These two guys are guys that, yes, I'm Big Ten biased. Sorry. But these two guys, they're two of the top 4 scorers in the nation, and they barely scored last year. These two guys will get drafted this year. I will for sure sell you that.
Now, this is going to circle back to what we were just talking about with those freshmen that left one and done and didn't get drafted. Look how much of a difference it made for these guys to come back to school for another year. Now they not only boosted their draft stock, but they improved so much as players and in their development. And now they're going to get a bigger payday in the NBA and a longer contract in the NBA. They're going to have a longer career. Yeah,
and another crazy thing is, I don't know if you know this, there's a guy, I just love this guy because I'm a Cavs fan, and we'll talk about the NBA. Taco Fall, he's just one of my favorite dudes, right? Yeah. There's a guy for Western Kentucky. I don't know if you heard of this guy. He's 7'5", 230 pounds. He's averaging 8.1 points, 7 rebounds, and 4.8 blocks a game. All right. I want you to look this guy up. His name is Jamarian Sharp. At some point, look up his highlight reel. He moves like he's 6'10". It's unreal. And this dude, he doesn't play a ton because I think his knees probably, but he's averaging, he's shooting 71% from the field, which he's only averaging 26 minutes a game, but still it's quite impressive to me.
I'm looking at a picture of him right now, and I'm like, man, 230 pounds on that frame is skinny.
His wings, it's ridiculous.
I mean, when you have height, light, and size like that, you gotta be like, man, that's mad potential.
It's almost like Manute Bol or Bol, his son, very tall, lanky, but they can move and do stuff with the ball. That's
the big thing. If you're that big and can move, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so those are some guys that I really think they're going to make a difference. Obviously, I think Ohio State, Liddell, he's also just a freak. I think he's up here, the top scorers too, if I can find him. Yeah, Liddell's up there too from Ohio State. He's very good as well. But so that's college basketball. Why don't we talk about some NBA? You know I'm a big Cavs fan. You know I'm a big Cavs fan.
Yeah.
What do you got? What do you got for me?
Man, dude. So I wish I was following the Cavs more because it's they're
actually good.
I'm following the NHL a lot more, and then
I should catch up on that. But the Blue Jackets suck, so
yeah, that's kind of taking a dent into my NBA following. But yeah, Cavs are looking pretty good, man. They just made a trade for Rondo to replace Rubio, but more importantly, that young group is coming together. And how much of that do you think has to do with just the getting experience and gelling, but also maybe just finally getting some stability at head coach JB Bickerstaff?
I would say a little bit of both. I would say. I think also Kevin Love needs to give a lot of props to Kevin Love. I think Kevin Love you're getting paid a lot of money, and now you're coming off the bench and you're averaging 15 and 8. But Kevin Love could have left 2 years ago. When LeBron left, we all of us Cavs fans thought the same thing. We're back to this really bad team. But there was part of me that was like, you know what? You have a couple young guards, and they're going to continue to build. And when they got Jared Allen, Kobe Altman's done an amazing job with the team. We lost Sexton this year and Rubio, and we're still winning. And that's the difference between this team and the team from 2 years ago, or even when LeBron was here. When LeBron got hurt or Kevin Love got hurt, the team played terrible. This is a team that's made up of guys that are not going to average 25 points a game. They're going to average 15 to 18 points a game. They're all going to contribute. You have Mobley, who might be the best rookie. Sorry, all y'all haters, the Cavs. He might be the best rookie out there.
Not a lot of guys I know that are Cavs fans were high on drafting him. He was okay.
Dude, I was super high on him. That was my pick. I said, you draft a guy that's 7 foot tall that can run the court and block shots. You put him and Allen in there. I mean, you could have a starting lineup. Get this. You could have a starting lineup of Kevin Love at the point guard. You could have Markkanen, who's 7'1". You could have Mobley and Jared Allen, who are both 7 foot, and then Taco Fall at center. I mean, you just imagine that lineup. I mean, I did that on 2K. It was amazing. Taco Fall. I mean, that's my dude.
Yeah, Mobley always seemed like the pick that made more sense because we've taken.
We have too many guards
back to back, and small guards too, like
tiny.
Sexton and Garland, I think, stand 6 foot barely. So
maybe.
That was on the defensive side, how they were going to be able to gel over there. But yeah, the Cavs are looking good. Maybe a team that's not looking so good right now that people expected to was the Lakers. And I saw this coming a mile away, Ben. I don't know about you, but the offseason they had signing all these guys that are like 40 years old, former All-Stars. Like maybe in 2012, this team is winning the NBA Finals, but in this current day that we're in 2022, this team, it just was like, man, these guys are they're not going to be good. And we're seeing it play out now. Yeah. Was this a surprise to you? Because to me, it makes complete sense.
Well, right now, actually, they're on a 5-game win streak because LeBron is playing center. I mean, I would have never thought that. But I'll say this. I think the Lakers will not win the title this year. They're not. I said at the beginning of the year, I think this is an old team. And in the NBA nowadays, you can't win with veterans. You just can't. And when your average age is like 31 years old and the Cavs average age is 22 and the Cavs have a better record than you, that just goes to show, right? Like, I think this is what I said. I think the Suns and the Warriors are the two teams to beat in the NBA. I think the Warriors are ridiculous because they're freaking 30-9 and they're adding Klay Thompson, who hasn't played 2 years, who's on basically kryptonite or like on cryo freeze. And he's just going to come out of the freezing chamber and drop 20 a game. Right. So the Lakers must learn that if you want LeBron, get rid of all the old dudes. And I mean, all of them. Clean house, get young guys in there, and then you might start playing some ball.
Yeah. I think that I totally agree with you. When you're that old, you're not going to be able to play deep into the playoffs because these guys aren't all built like LeBron. We've seen LeBron do it time.
LeBron's a freak. LeBron's just a freak.
Yeah, so maybe the Lakers being as bad as they have been has been a surprise to some people. But a team that has been surprisingly good has been the Chicago Bulls. I'm looking right now. They're first place in the East right now.
Yep.
Now, I know they made some key moves getting guys like Lonzo Ball and DeMar DeRozan, but I didn't think that would all add up to being on the same level as like the Brooklyn Nets and the Milwaukee Bucks. What do you think of
the there's part of me in the East, right? Like that. I want to believe the Bulls are legit, but I just see those Nets sitting there and I see who they have on their team. And I'm going, the whole Kyrie situation is a wholly different situation, but I think the Bulls are very much like the Cavs. I think the Cavs and the Bulls are very similar. They have a bunch of dudes that hustle, that play really hard, that are willing to just distribute the ball, score. I'm looking at them right now and you look at their, their stats in general. And they're just, I mean, their leading scorer is DeMar DeRozan. I mean, no doubt. Him and Zach LaVine, they're going to lead in scoring. They're going to average 20 a game. But they have dudes like Vujacic, who's averaging 12 rebounds. Lonzo Ball's having a great year. Alex Caruso, my dude, the white dude that can dunk and dunk it sweet. You know, he's averaging 3 steals a game almost. And so they're very much like the Cavs, where they have a bunch of dudes. They have 2 scorers with a bunch of dudes that can just do things. And I think don't be shocked if you look at the East playoffs this year and you go, wait a minute, why are there a whole bunch of teams we're not used to seeing? I think that's could happen this year in the playoffs for the East, at least.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, so the Bulls are up there, the Nets are up there, and maybe no surprise. Cavs being a surprise. Is there any
the Hornets and Raptors too? Hornets and Raptors are also kind of surprised.
Well, yeah. Is there any kind of key trade you think that any of these teams in the East might have to make? Like, I know at the beginning of the year, it was Ben Simmons trade seemed inevitable, and he didn't move. Maybe Milwaukee's not doing as good as what they could be, or maybe they're just going to play things out.
I think if you look at the East and you look at the top, I think 4 through 8, right? Like the Hornets, Raptors, Cavs, 70s. I think one of those teams is going to make a big deal. I don't know what it will be. I think they're going to make something that's going to make them over the edge. I think the Cavs, they might go to another guard, getting a shooting guard, something that can do some things with that. I think the Bucks could go that way. Sixers just need to get rid of Ben Simmons. He's a cancer. They just need to get him off the rope. I think the team you look for is I think Pelicans, the Blazers, the Pistons and Pacers are the 4 teams I say they might just start unloading guys. The Pacers especially might start unloading guys. LeVert has been talked about going to Cleveland. Not LeVert. Their big guy, whatever. I can't remember his name. But
Miles Turner.
Yeah. So there's been talks that these kind of guys might get moved around. Will it happen? Who knows? But I think that's a really good chance for that to happen. So, yeah.
Yeah. Man, how about the Pacers, man? Just a couple years ago.
I know.
With Victor Oladipo and Miles Turner and, man, what's his name? Is it?
I got it. I got you. It's, I got you. Sabonis. Yeah.
All 3 of them together. And then they make moves to get, guys like LeVert and Malcolm Brogdon, and they're supposed to be just fine, right?
Yeah.
And the Indiana fans definitely are disappointed with how things have turned out. They fired their head coach last year after 1 year. They brought in a new guy. Not sure how long he's going to last, but yeah, what a fall off for the Pacers just a couple of years ago.
Yeah, it is tough. And I think, that it is what it is. It's the NBA. We all know it doesn't always last long, but yeah, that's the thing. Now I want to throw this fun question at you for the NBA. What was your childhood, like not before our childhood, but as you're growing up, as I was growing up, what was your 1-2 basketball player that you always loved watching?
So LeBron James being the Cleveland Cavs star, an Ohio kid, me being an Ohio kid, I think that is pretty much who everybody in Ohio looked up to. And in general, around the time, I would think that it was either LeBron or Kobe for most kids our age. But actually, the second guy that I liked watching even more than Kobe was Steve Nash.
Yeah.
And some of that had to do with playing the NBA 2K and stuff like that. Like watching him kind of make all the fancy passes and being a great 3-point shooter and like the catalyst to one of the greatest offenses we ever saw in the NBA at the time with the Phoenix Suns there. Like with the amount that they were just scoring, it was absolutely incredible. And Nash was a guy that I looked up to as well, besides LeBron.
Yeah, I would say for me, obviously LeBron, I mean, you grow up in Ohio, like you said. If you don't like LeBron, then you're just like a villain. I would say for me, 2 guys, actually. Dirk Nowitzki was probably one of the guys I loved watching as a taller kid. I wanted to be a shooter. And that was just a guy that I looked at, like that could make crazy shots, that could just for a guy his size. Right. And I think another one that probably surprised a lot of people. And it's interesting to me is Mike Miller. Mike Miller was another guy I loved. Not Mike Miller. Sorry. Kyle Korver. That's who I meant to say. Not Mike Miller, Kyle Korver, because as a kid that grew up, especially in high school, a shooter, I looked at a guy that was similar to my size, wasn't a great athlete per se. Like he was a good athlete, but wasn't like a just ridiculous athlete, but could shoot. And that's what I wanted to be. And so I would say those 2 guys were kind of the guys I modeled my game after. And I never got to the level, but it was still good to do it, So, yeah.
Very interesting. Yeah, I could talk all day about the NBA guys that we used to grow up watching. It's
totally
changed, Ben, hasn't it?
It's changed, man, and I would say that, to finish up, I'll say this: I think the game has changed, and I think sports in general have changed. And I think you can attest to this too. It's hard sometimes to watch sports. Like I think there's so much politics in the game now that it's super hard for me to turn on a game and go, wow, they're talking about some other thing that's going on in the world that has nothing to do with the sporting event at all, but you want to make it about it. And I think we need to get back to going to sports to get away from life. That's what we all grew up doing. We watched sports because we were tired of life and we just wanted to enjoy something. I don't know. Give your take on that. I just think that's my take.
I mean, that's honestly partially what was the final straw in pushing me away from the NBA. Like, we know the game has changed, right? With Steph Curry kind of being like that guy that can shoot threes and hit them from pretty much anywhere on the court. But I think his style of play, coupled with several generations now going through the AAU system, like, it's just, we see a much more selfish / ISO dominated / very poor possessions, quickly jacked up threes, bricked shots, and so many bad possessions that the game just isn't fun for me to watch personally. Now you couple that with the lack of loyalty and the way that max contracts work and how it allows super teams to form. And it seems like every year, like, there's just so many guys shuffling around that you have to, like, basically totally relearn all the NBA rosters. And then you throw in the fact that, they're going to make all these shrines for organizations like Black Lives Matter that have nothing to do with the NBA. And they're just not only put on what I think is a bad product of basketball, but also tell me how racist I am. That just was like the final straw. Like, okay, well, I guess I'm not really interested in watching the NBA anymore. And then the Cavs not being as good, it was just
and the numbers going down. I mean, the numbers went down. It's shown that when you make sports political, people stop watching the game. It's just general, any sport it is.
Yeah, the sport. So the NBA, like, I still like to watch college basketball. I watch a decent amount of high school basketball with my job as a sports journalist out here. Like, I still love the game, but the NBA product right now is not one that is my favorite. Yeah. But I always did think that sports were, a means to bring people together, people of different.
And now it's pushing people apart.
Political parties, all those disagreements were set aside because you guys were all cheering for the same team and coming together in that regard. And now sports are being used to divide people even further. Yeah. So, and then, like you said, they aren't really talking much about the game anymore. They're more talking about things that are going on off the field. And it's not even that uncommon to turn on ESPN First Take and see Max Kellerman, Stephen A. Smith debating about whether or not a police shooting was done correctly rather than how the Brooklyn Nets did the other day. So
it is a reality. And that's just it's unfortunate, but it is what it is. But I'm going to go back into time as we finish up to something we did. If you ever listened to our show way back, 5 years ago or whatever, I always threw a question in at the end of the show, which both Jamie and Josh despise most of the time because it made no sense and to anything in life. So I'm going to pull one out from the ashes of the terrible jokes or the terrible stories or terrible questions that have been said. But if you look back, I would not really look back, but if you had your choice of a dinner, right, with 3 famous people, right? They can't be the same profession, but 3 famous people, who would they be? If you could go to dinner and be like, I'm going to dinner with this person, this person, this person, who would it be?
All right. Right off the bat, we're going to have Joe Rogan in that group.
That's a great one. That is genius.
I've been on a tear lately listening to his podcast.
Hey, Joe Rogan, if you want to invest in my podcast, please do. I'd be more than happy, Joe Rogan.
That would be the ultimate guest, yeah. But I love listening to Joe's show. I also kind of love how he does things. He just
he's a liberal, but he doesn't act like a liberal. That's what I love about it.
Yeah, like, it's funny, like, and we can get into the politics discussion with Joe right now, actually, a little bit, but he gets called like a hard left winger, even though he's talked to Ben Shapiro multiple times and Candace Owens and other people like that. But he also gets called like, a right wing nut, even though he's talked to Tulsi Gabbard and Bernie Sanders. And it's just like,
The dude should just doing his job. That's what he's doing.
Yeah, like I know he will say he's a Democrat and leans left on most issues, and that might just be him kind of like fighting the urge to be conservative. I don't know what's going on in Joe's brain, but I'm just what he has said is he is more left, except when it comes to like gun rights and like medical freedom. More recently, that's something that he's also been talking a lot about, and with bringing on certain doctors on your show. But Joe is awesome, so he would definitely be.
So Joe, gotcha, Joe.
Number one on that list. Number two, we're gonna pick somebody out of the sports world, and one athlete that I'm really kind of enjoying watching right now is. And this is going to shock you, Ben, because I said that I'm not too much of an NBA guy, but let's bring Giannis Antetokounmpo.
Oh, yeah, 100%, 100%.
Giannis is just kind of like the anti-modern NBA player, right? He's not the best three-point shooter. He's a team-first guy.
He's a freak.
He comes from, like, nothing and has become something.
He's from Europe.
So humble and works hard. Like, that's a dude that I would love to meet and be associated with.
So there's two. So Giannis and Joe. Who's the third one?
Joe, yeah. And then number three, another maybe kind of out there one. Let's roll with Kanye West.
Oh,
right?
I love that. That'd be great. That'd be 100% great.
No, at least everything that I hear about Kanye is he's just so creative, like in the studio with making music. He's super successful in the fashion industry, and it just seems like everywhere he goes, he just kind of finds success in what he's interested in. So I'd kind of love to just kind of. And people might say, no, I want to say pick his brain, but they're like, well, there's not really much in his brain, Josh, because.
No, he's a smart guy.
I think a lot of people undermine like how, maybe not intelligent, but how creative he is.
Yeah.
And then if I was to pick a fourth, like if there was a fourth alternate, Snoop Dogg would be that other guy.
Oh, of course. Couldn't go wrong with Snoop. So that's a nice, there we go. I like that. So mine, okay. Yes. Oh, I've thought about this obviously for a while because I do this. I just ponder on my way to work every day. Number one for me would be Matthew McConaughey because I mean, like he's one of my, so fun fact, a girl I work with at the school here in Hungary, her cousin is Matthew McConaughey.
No kidding.
So like first cousin, not like fifth, like first cousin. So yeah, I just think that's kind of cool. So I'd be Matthew McConaughey mainly because he's been one of my favorite actors. Like I love like, there's a couple good movies I really like of his. But that's besides the point. My second one, I think partly because of me living in Europe, I would love to sit down with Messi. And I just want to like hear like what the soccer life was like. Like I didn't grow up watching soccer. I didn't really like soccer until I got to Europe. And like, just want to hear like, what's the journey like? How do you go from being like 6 years old and signing with a team and then signing with Barcelona? Like, what's that process like? So that to me seems really interesting. And my brother obviously grew up playing soccer and stuff. That'd be two. Three for me would be Gordon Ramsay because I just want to know how to cook like him. And how does he like? How does he control his anger? Because like that dude, he goes from like yelling to being like the lovable dad. Is he actually
like going off camera, or is he put on a show for?
Supposedly he's like that at home. So. Yeah, so it's like so that's probably that, and then probably the last one. Oh man, that's a tough one. So wait, did I have three already? Did I have three?
Yeah, you.
Yes, I have three. I'll do an alternate. Yeah, so my alternate would be, shoot, I already did a sports person. I was going to go with Bronson Arroyo because it's just he's amazing he's classic, but I won't go with him. I would have to go with Tim Hawkins because I grew up with Tim Hawkins, and Tim Hawkins is just a freaking goofball dad. Basically, he's a comedian, Christian comedian. If you don't know who he is, check him out. He's hilarious. That would probably be my alternate. He'd be like the driver. He would drive me to the thing. That'd be kind of how it works. But yeah. So first off, I want to say thank you, Josh, for coming on here. It really it brought back a lot of good memories. Who knows? Maybe we'll do more of these. We'll hook up more and we'll do some more episodes. But before you go, tell us about like what you're doing right now and where people can find you on social media and stuff like that.
Yeah, man. So right now I'm a sports journalist in Indiana, covering mostly high school stuff just in our county. The organization is called the Bluffton News Banner. So there is a paywall, I believe, to read anything that I write, but you can check out our website at news-banner.com if you want to read any kind of like my writing. Sometimes I'll put columns out to just kind of my opinion outside of like the high school realm. But on social media, I do YouTube as well. You can just search out us. Instagram is JBURRIS 96, but I also have a fitness related page, more like fitness and nutrition related content, which is at Josh is Jacked. So
there we go.
That's where you can find me, Ben.
Awesome. Hey, I appreciate you taking time out of your Sunday to be on. If you guys like this enough, comment below if you'd like to see more videos of Josh and I, our podcast episodes or whatever. Even though we're across the pond from each other, we can still do this, thankfully, to Zoom and all that. So thank you so much for tuning in. It meant a lot. And I'm glad that you were able to be on this. If you guys love this episode of the podcast, go ahead and make sure you like it and favorite it on all the social media platforms. Podcast. There are so many of them, Josh. I get lost all of them. Just wherever you can find it. And if you look on YouTube, if you're watching on YouTube, hit that thumbs up button, hit that subscribe button. That way you can stay tuned with all my episodes of my 2 podcasts that I have, as well as any other videos that come out with my wife and I or anything like that. It really would mean a lot. And you'll just maybe get to enjoy something or maybe not. I don't really know. But anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Baseline Podcast.